Hello, and welcome to another of Mr. Bench's book reviews. What's in the box today? There's the box. Open it. It's Frog and Toad Storybook Treasury again. Now this is continuing the series of reading from this book. And I'm a bit under the weather, which is why I'm wearing a dressing gown. Don't worry about that. So, we're going to have one from Frog and Toad are Friends. If you're not familiar with this, go to the book just titled Frog and Toad Storybook Treasury. I mean the video. And there I do a bit more intro, but here I'm just going to get straight into a story. It's from Frog and Toad are Friends, and it's called The Story. The Story, if you like. So it must be pretty good. One day in summer, they often mention the time of year, even in the ones that aren't about, there's another one called Spring, that I cover in another video, and this one takes place in summer. I guess the seasons are very important for frogs and toads, which is why they're very often mentioned. Anyway, one day in summer, doesn't say which, so you've got 92 to choose from, approximately. Frog was not feeling well. Toad said. They've introduced both Frog and Toad in the first 3 lines, which is quite common to get both Frog and Toad in there quite early, and there's a picture straight away. It's Frog in bed and Toad near the bed. Beds feature quite prominently as well. There was a bed in the last one and Toad was in it, and no frogs in this bed. Anyway, Frog was not feeling well. Toad said, "Frog, you're looking quite green." "But I always look green," said Frog. That's good. You don't know if he's going to use that as part of the joke or if they're just going to pretend that it's unusual to look green, but no. "But I always look green," said Frog. "I am a frog." Frog is a frog. "Today you look very green, even for a frog," said Toad. Toad is brown, as you'll notice from the pictures. So, maybe it's natural. Maybe when Toad was young, his parents used to tell him he looked green, so he's used to that. Anyway, "Get into my bed and rest." So I guess they're at Toad's house, which they hadn't said before. And there's Frog in the bed resting. Toad made Frog a cup of hot tea. Frog drank the tea, and then he said, "Tell me a story while I'm resting." Doesn't say please or anything, but I think they just know each other so well that they don't have to say please and thank you constantly. "Alright," said Toad. "Let me think of a story to tell you." So it is a story about a story. There you go. Toad thought and thought, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. It's unfortunate. There he's sitting on a stool, thinking. And there's a clock, which is quite a nice touch to the illustration because it emphasises the fact he's thinking for a long time. He thought and thought. So it suggests that tick-tock, he's just getting annoyed by the ticking of the hands and unable to think of a story. "I will go out on the front porch and walk up and down," said Toad. Must be getting annoyed by the clock. "Perhaps that will help me to think of a story." Toad walked up and down on the porch for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. That's nice repetition, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. He's had one twice now. And just so you know, they often start the sentence with "but," which is nice. Let's break it up a bit. Then Toad went into the house and stood on his head. "Why are you standing on your head?" asked Frog. That's what I want to know too. He was standing on his head. "I hope that if I stand on my head it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. I don't know how common that is. Toad stood on his head for a long time. They're not showing the clock now, but they had it earlier, so it's implicitly there. But he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Then Toad poured a glass of water over his head. I guess that's like washing your face to kind of freshen up. "Why are you pouring water over your head?" asked Frog. I hope that if I pour water over my head, it will help me to think of a story, said Toad. Toad poured many glasses of water over his head, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. This is one of these very nice. You get it quite a bit in kind of children's stories. Like this nice repetition. Things escalating. You know, he started just sitting, then he was walking, then he was doing headstands, and now he's splashing water in his face. What's next? Then Toad began to bang his head against the wall. I'm not sure they're all quite head-focused activities. You must think that if he activates his head, that's where the thoughts will emerge. So he's aware of brains and things, that's good. Why you bang your head against the wall? Asked Frog. I hope that if I bang my head against the wall hard enough, it will help me to think of a story, said Toad. Look, there's a picture, and he's got like dizzy lines around his head, so he's actually done that quite violently. I am feeling much better now, Toad, said Frog. I do not think I need a story anymore. One thing about this is that they speak, at least here, without, I think they're called contractions, things like don't and I'll and stuff, and I'm. Like, even though it's very conversational, normally you'd say, I'm feeling much better now, Toad, but they always write it out. I am feeling much better now, Toad. I think that's good for young readers, probably, but it also makes it sound like they have a certain amount of formality in their relationship. They would probably, if they were French, use like the formal you to each other, even though they're like best mates. And basically in love, it's kind of like this, you know, they're not officially married or anything, so they probably maintain a certain amount of formality. Anyway, I do not think I need a story anymore. Then you get out of bed and let me get into it, said Toad, because now I feel terrible. That's quite funny. I mean, he's been slamming his head against the wall. Frog said, would you like me to tell you a story, Toad? Yes, said Toad, if you know one. Well, tables are turned. Will Frog know a story? Once upon a time, seems to, said Frog, there were two good friends, a frog and a toad. The frog was not feeling well. He asked his friend the toad to tell him a story. The toad could not think of a story. He walked up and down on the porch, but he could not think of a story. He stood on his head, but he could not think of a story. He poured water over his head, but he could not think of a story. He banged his head against the wall, but he still could not think of a story. Then the toad did not feel so well, and the frog was feeling better. So the toad went to bed, and the frog got up and told him a story. The end. How was that, Toad? Said Frog. But Toad did not answer. He had fallen asleep. And that's the end. Well, that's very meta, isn't it? I mean, within the story, called The Story, Frog tells the story of what's just happened in the story, called The Story. So, lots of levels to that one. You have to be a bit concerned that Toad has concussion after all this head banging and swift descent into sleep. I would want to check on him if I was Frog, but I'm sure he is. I mean, they are good friends, so I'm sure he'll make sure he gets any medical attention he requires. Quite funny. I think that's funny. I like the bit where he says, because now I feel terrible. That's a nice line, and obviously you have very nice use of rhythm and repetition, and the escalation of doing more and more radical things to his head to attempt to get a story. And actually, even though he doesn't think of the story, through his actions, he does create the story that Toad then tells him. So that's nice. Great teamwork. Well, another wonderful Frog and Toad story. And do tune in again for another one, as I'll be doing a few from the Frog and Toad Storybook Treasury by Arnold Lobel. See you again next time for another of Mr. Bench's book reviews. Bye.